me. We're going to be in the Gospel of Matthew, and we're going to be in chapters 10 and 13. 10 and 13, and we're finishing up our series that we've been preaching for the last 6 weeks called I'm Hanging on His Words. And there's a moment in the scriptures where Jesus is preaching things, and he's preaching things like, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you cannot be my disciple. And a number of the people that were following him, he loses like a bunch of his church. A bunch of people go, that's weird, I'm going to head out. He looks at the disciples and he says, are you guys going to leave too? If you remember what Peter says, where else would we go? For you alone hold the words of life and death. And I don't know about you, but I want to hang on the words of Jesus because he alone has the words of life. And so we've been taking the last 6 weeks and looking at these words that he said about important topics. And I want to continue and finish up this series. And then next week, we're going to start our series in the fall and kind of talk about our word of the year. But I want to preach a message that I've been calling today, Wheat and Weeds. Wheat and weeds. And it's out of Matthew chapter 10, verse 16. Jesus says this, he says, behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Beware of men, for they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues. And you will be dragged before governors and kings for my sake to bear witness before them and the Gentiles. And when they deliver you over, do not be anxious about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of the Father speaking through you. And then in Matthew chapter 13, verse 24, Jesus tells a story to kind of illustrate what he just said. It says he put on another parable for them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seeds in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servant of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds? He said to them, an enemy has done this. So the servant said to him, then do you want us to go and gather them? But he said, no. Lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. Wheat and weeds. Let's pray together today over the preaching of God's word. God, thank you so much for who you are. And Lord, I pray that you would give us a confidence to live in this world and not be of this world. And God, use this morning to speak to us through your word, to remind us that we can thrive anywhere if you're with us. So God, we love you and we're grateful for you in Jesus' name. And we all said, amen. Amen. Anybody here ever fight with your spouse over the environment of your home? You ever get in a disagreement about things like the temperature in your house? Come on, let me see your hand if you ever kind of have this discussion. Now, where are all the people in the room? You are like 74 and above. Let me see your hand. Keep your hand up. We want to know who all the maniacs are. Let me see your hand if you're like a 68 and under. Let's keep that thing frigid, right? So this is a constant debate and a constant, it's actually not even a fight. We just both are like ninjas walking around our house. At every moment I'm trying to turn down the air, and Christina's trying to turn up the temperature, and that's why sometimes I'll be like sleeping, I'm like, why am I sweating? I'll get out of bed and I'll go to the thermostat, I'm like, it is 74 degrees in here. My goodness, right? So we have these conversations. Another thing about our house is Christina can go to bed with dishes in the sink. She can. Not a lot of dishes, but she can go to bed with there's a couple dishes in there. I cannot. I can't go to bed if there's a fork in the sink, okay? If somebody put a fork in the sink, I'd just be laying there looking at the ceiling all night, going, I got to go put it in the dishwasher. I just can't do it. Sometimes you even kind of go at it a little bit of the environment and what you're going to allow your kids to do. Right, this has been a little bit of tension. For example, the other day, Christina came in the living room, and Justice is at a stage now where he plays video games a little bit. I'm really liking this season. I'm really enjoying this. And so I'm like, oh man, what's a game that Justice and I can play together? And I thought, oh, there was a game that I played when I was a kid that was awesome. It was called Mortal Kombat. It's amazing. So I was like, I'll buy Mortal Kombat. The thing that had not dawned on me is the graphics are so much better now. This is a different Mortal Kombat than so I download Mortal Kombat, and Justin and I are just playing Mortal Kombat. And Christina, the psychologist, walks into the living room, and it was like almost like, honestly, it wasn't a fair assessment of the overall game, because it was like right when she walked into the living room, it was a literal finish 'em type moment. And this like sphere flies out of one guy, goes into the other guy, rips it out. There's like blood everywhere. And she looked and she goes, "What are you doing?" I look at Justice and I go, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" and we're all, to different degrees, trying to curate our surroundings. Right? We all care about our environment. We all care about the things that are going on around us, and that's not a bad thing, right? We care about the environment in our workplace, right? We don't want to work in toxic work environments. We don't want to work for people that are unappreciative, or we don't want to work for people that lie. Like, I totally get that. Come on, we all want to go to a church that has a great environment. Like, we care about the environment, and that the gospel is being preached, and that God's being worshiped, and that there's integrity, and all those things. Like, we care deeply about our environment, and I think those things are okay. I think those things are good. But here's the reality, is that you can curate the best environment possible, but you are still gonna have to be inwardly led. You can curate man, I went to the right college, and I got the right roommates, and I married the right person, and I got and you can curate all you want, you still are gonna have to be inwardly led. Why? Because in a moment, that perfectly manicured and curated environment can change on you. Right? That perfect setup that you think you have, it can flip on you. And here's my point. My only point today is this, is that the environment we find ourselves in can be outdone by the condition we find ourselves in. The environment you find yourself in. So let's say the environment isn't that great. Let's say it's not flourishing. All that kind of stuff. The environment you find yourself in, it can be outdone by the condition we find ourselves in. And by the way, that works both ways. Right? So I know people that have found themselves in amazing environments. They have found themselves with great people. They have found themselves with incredible environments, but the condition they were in was not up for being in that environment. Conversely, I've seen it happen the other way, to where, man, I've seen people be able to endure the craziest of environments. Why? Because the condition that they were in gave them the strength to be able to be in an environment that was not conducive for their flourishing, and yet they still flourished. Ask Joseph. Right? And so the question is not, hey, how good are you and I at curating our environment? Is how much of us on the inside are we allowing God to put his hands on and shape and form and develop, so that you and I can be in any environment and still flourish. This is why we can be sheep amongst wolves, and we can be wheat amongst weed. This is why we are able to do this, and this is the kind of people that this world desperately needs the people of Jesus to be. And this is why Jesus talked about it. He says, "Behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so I want you to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." And he says, man, people are gonna do harmful things to you. And then in verse 19, he says, when they deliver you over, don't be anxious about how you're gonna speak or what you're gonna say, for this is gonna be given to you by the Lord. And God is gonna be actually speaking through you. See, you and I, we need some tools. We need some tools. I'm pretty incapable when it comes to doing things around the house. Pretty incapable. Now, I'm not talking about like things like dishes. I don't want to brag. We're in church, but like I'm elite. Okay? I'm elite when it comes to like doing. I'm talking about like building things. I am deficient I struggle. And so I need help to do everything, right? I need help to do everything. And so when we first moved into our house, we had to hang curtains. And a friend had said, hey, man, if you need help hanging curtains, man, I can do that. Like, I can help you with that. And this is what he said. He goes, it'll take me 45 minutes. I could hang all your curtains in your house in about 45 minutes. I'm like, first of all, stop. Like, don't make me feel less of a man because a task that takes you 45 minutes would be an impossibility for me. Like don't do that. But I got to be honest, I took him up on it because the last time we moved into a house and me and Christina tried to hang curtains, it almost cost us our marriage. So I was like, yes, I need your help. And so he asked me, he goes, hey, man, and he mentioned like 4 tools. He goes, hey, do you have bop, 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 bop? Now, there's a reason why I'm not mentioning the tools. Because I didn't know what he was talking about. He says, hey, do you have bop, 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 bop? And I was like, let me text Christina. And he goes, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll just bring my own tools, right? And I don't have tools for that stuff. Why? Because I don't do that kind of stuff. And so much of your life and my life will ultimately come down to the tools at your disposal. It's going to be very difficult for you to do the things that God has called you to do without maturing and growing with the tools that he has set up for you and I. And he set up a couple of tools. So one of the tools that he has set up, which was a game changer, is remember when Jesus, if you've been around church, you might remember Jesus said this. He said, hey, it's to your benefit that I leave. Now, mind you, this is like Jesus Christ. Like, I don't know about you, but like, I'd want to hold on to Jesus for as long as I could. Like physical manifestation, like God incarnate. Like, wait, how is this to my benefit that you leave? He said, because I'm going to send a helper, the Holy Spirit, that's going to go before you. And so the first thing that God does is that he empowers us with his Spirit. This is why he's saying, hey, when you're going through difficult times, and in this case, by the way, he's talking about people that are going to be martyred for the faith. So he's talking about like the most difficult times. Hey, when you're going through difficult times, don't worry about it. Why? Because God the Father is going to help see you through it. He's going to empower you. He's going to strengthen you. So one of the things that he gives us is he empowers us with his Spirit. But then the other thing he gives us, and this is so vital that we grab onto this, and this is the crux of my message today, is he gives us wisdom. He gives us wisdom. And he's saying, hey, if you can hold these two things together, then it's going to help you. And I have the fundamental belief that a huge part of your issues and my issues, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's with our spouses, or whether it's with raising children, or whether it's at school, whatever it is, it's because we don't know how to carry these two tensions that he talks about. And what does he talk about? He goes, hey, when you're going to go through difficult times, if you're going to be sheep amongst wolves, and if you're going to be wheat amongst weeds, then you better know how to be both shrewd and pure. You better know how to carry wisdom and innocence all at the same time. Now, here's the good news about what Jesus says, is he's not naive of the world he's sending us into. In fact, he can say it in no more of a direct way. Like, there is no other way that he can be as confrontational as he is, other than to say, hey guys, welcome to church. We're glad you're at Grace City. All right, here's what we're doing. Right after this, I'm sending you out as sheep amongst wolves. Like, he's not mincing words. He's not like, hey, you might have a couple bad days. Hey, your boss might not like you as much as he likes your He's not saying that. He's saying, hey, I'm sending you back into a very, very seemingly difficult situation. And because I'm sending you back in that situation, man, you got to know how to be shrewd, be wise as serpents, and innocent as doves. Here's why you need both. So let's go with the wisdom. Like you need wisdom. You need wisdom in your life. You need to be able to discern truth. You need to be able to discern things. You need to be shrewd. You need to not just take everybody at their word. Like there has to be some wisdom and some thought processes behind what you're believing and how you're navigating and what decisions that you're making. However, this is so important, is that wisdom without innocence will eventually get self-serving. Right? So wisdom without innocence, wisdom without purity eventually will only serve itself, because you go, oh man, I'm good and I'm amazing, and there's no purity to what you're doing. And so it eventually gets self-serving. Now there's the other side. There's the other side of innocence or purity. So he says, hey, I want you to be wise as serpents, but I also want you to stay innocent. I want you to stay innocent. I want you to stay pure. And this is very important, is that innocence without wisdom eventually turns into ignorance. And so what he's saying is like, yeah, stay pure. Stay innocent. But don't be naive. You got to understand the tactics of the enemy and what he's trying to do in and through your life. And so I wrote down a few phrases that are just an example of how we can do both. Here's the first phrase. I can't get into every fight, but some things are worth fighting for. Right. That would be a phrase that would show us that, no, wisdom and purity. I can't get into every fight. So, some of you want to get into every fight, and it lacks wisdom. You want to fight every battle. Like I was talking to somebody in my family recently, and don't you love, like, this is like, I love the climate we're living in where like everybody cares passionately about everything. It's my favorite right now. Can you feel the sarcasm? Like everybody, I was talking to a family member one time. This is somebody that like I grew up around. And he asked me, he goes, what do you think about? And then he named a topic. What are your thoughts on this topic? I go, I don't know. I mean, I got some thoughts, but it's not something I devote a substantial amount of time researching. It's not something that like and I go, well, what do you think? And this relative of mine talked about this thing like it was like the most passionate thing that he has ever encountered in his life. And I grew up in this home, and I've never heard him talk about this at any other time in my life. And he goes, you don't care about this? And I'm like, I didn't know you did until 5 minutes ago. But we live in a day and age where like we all feel like we got to fight every fight. And can I tell you, you don't have enough bones in your body to break to get into every fight. So the wisdom to know, okay, I can't fight every fight, but the purity to say, but there are some things worth fighting for. The innocence to go, I can't just sit them all out. There are some things that I have to get involved with. Here's another phrase. I don't trust everyone, but I'm compelled to forgive everyone. I don't trust everyone. Wisdom. Can I tell you? Trust is earned, my friend. Trust is earned. Anytime someone's like, oh, you don't trust me? Maybe I don't. Maybe I don't. Maybe you've done things that have broken trust. And that's okay. It doesn't make you evil. It just means you got to rebuild trust. It just means that we got, right? So listen, I don't trust everyone. However, I want to stay pure. How do you stay pure? I'm compelled by God to forgive everyone. To the degree that you give is the degree that you receive. Trust and forgiveness are not the same thing. Here's another phrase. I can love you and still tell you the truth. Oh, today in our culture, right? Like, oh, be loving, be loving. Like, it's like we have turned Jesus into this, like, just like the nicest guy we know. And then you read the Bible and you're like, I don't know that totally washes. You read the Bible and you're like, he's like brood of vipers, and you're like, whoa, rude. Like. It's like, well, no. I tell you the truth because I love you, right? So there's wisdom in the truth. There's purity in the love. So we need both. And so Jesus is saying, hey, how you manage this. See, we're not sheep, and I think we got to get this out of our mind. If you're following Jesus, can I encourage you to get this out of your mind? We are not sheep because we're defenseless. We are sheep because we're surrendered to the shepherd. We are not sheep because we're defenseless. If you're a Christian in this room, we got to get out of this like, oh man, things just happen and I didn't see it coming even though we kind of did. Like, we're not defenseless. We're not defenseless. Can I tell you this? You dictate how people treat you. You decide how people treat you at work. You decide how people treat you in the home. And the only way you can do this is with a measure of discernment to say, I'm going to walk in wisdom and I'm also going to walk in purity. Let me give you an example from, a time that I was on staff at this place, and my boss and I just like, we weren't vibing. And it wasn't like untenable, but like, like not getting along with your boss is like tale as old as time, right? And so I remember thinking the environment wasn't untenable. It wasn't like I couldn't work there. It wasn't like I was like an indentured servant or anything like crazy like that. It was just like we were missing each other. And I think there was some things that kind of he had against me. And it was kind of like, okay, that was my perspective. And I remember going, but life is too short to just walk on eggshells. And I'm a firm believer of like, man, you got to have conversations with people. You just got to have conversations. And I remember for the first time in my life, I was around and I found myself getting smaller so that the people around me could feel bigger. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I found myself going, man, I got to get smaller so the people around me can get bigger. And I didn't like what that was turning me into. I didn't like that was like stifling off some things in me. And so I remember I go, bump it. So I set up a meeting. I remember I sat down in his office and I just said, hey, I just want to let you know I'm submitted. I know how to be an employee. I know how to work hard. And I know how to make other people look good, and I don't mind doing that. I'm happy to do it. In addition to that, for the last month and a half, I've felt like I've been in a position where I have to get smaller so that you and some of the other people at your level can feel bigger. And I just don't really want to live like that. So what I'm going to do is what I've always done. I'm just going to be me all the way. I'm going to be me to the max. And I'm going to still make you guys look good. And I'm an honoring person. And so I'm going to still submit, and I'll do whatever you ask me to do. I'll do so long as it doesn't break like a moral code of mine or anything like that, but I'll do whatever you want me to do. And it was like a 10-minute, you imagine how awkward that conversation would be with your boss. And it was an awkward conversation, and then we went on, and the relationship was still a little awkward, but at least I was freed up. And what that showed me was, no, this is how God has called us to live. Wisdom, shrewdness. I'm not going to just let people treat me however they want to treat me. I'm not just going to live in unhealth. Some of you, you're living in unhealth and you're calling it purity, but there's no shrewdness to you. Conversely, I wasn't going to go in there and go, I'm not going to do what you tell me. No, this is my boss. This is my boss. I'm still submitted and I'm still accountable for how I respond to those that God has placed over me. So that is a reality too. And what I'm here to tell you is the better you can get at this game, the better you can get at stewarding these two things. I'm shrewd and I'm wise and I'm pure and I'm innocent. The better you can do, the more fruitful your life becomes. It's why Jesus is instructing us in this very nuanced thing. And then in verse 24 in Matthew 13, he puts it in parable form. So now he tells them a story to kind of illustrate the same thing. He says, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field, but while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, now this is an important phrase that we have to catch. Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds? So they're shocked and they look at the master and they go, this is very, very confusing. Very recently, Christina and I, we were putting up shrubs in our house to kind of give us like a little barrier, between our neighbors and stuff like that, like a visual type thing. And so we were putting up shrubs and we had our landscaper out there and he was kind of like looking and the neighbor came over and he was like, he was ready to go. He was fired up. And he wanted to make sure that our landscaper was not going to put our shrubs in his yard. He wanted to make sure that the property line was like, hey, you're not putting them on my property. And our landscaper was like, no, of course not. No, we wouldn't do that. And he goes, okay, then I want them to pay for a surveyor so that we can have the property line like assessed. See, guys, and this is where like you pastor a large church and you got to do stuff. Can't be getting in a fight with your neighbor and be the senior pastor of Grace City. So we were like, okay, right? That's kind of how it goes. And so we were like, okay, yeah, we'll pay for the assessment. We're the ones putting the shrubs in. But here's what happened.
that line was not where he thought it was going to be. And the reason why that line wasn't where he thought it was going to be is because we have different types of grass. And his grass had creeped onto our side. And what he found is that line was about 5 to 6 feet further onto his property than he originally thought. And we're like, man, we just want to put it on the property line, bro. That's what we want to do. He was confused because of his grass that was in our grass. You want to know, I think sometimes the thing that takes out our faith is that we're living life and we feel like we're doing all the right things. And we wake up one morning and we go, where'd these weeds come from? Wait. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Where's this pokey grass coming from? Wait. I thought my boundaries were this. And I didn't think that grass was supposed to be in my grass because I'm doing everything right. I'm going to church. I'm talking kindly to people. I'm reading my Bible. I'm praying. I'm tithing. I'm serving. I'm in a group. I'm doing all this stuff. Can I tell you, listen, weeds are a part of life, my friend. Weeds are a part of it. And what God is establishing in you and what he's establishing in me is, hey, I can make you flourish anywhere. So I can bring up wheat from a whole field of weeds, and I can raise up sheep among wolves. Like, this is what I'm doing. And we got to stop looking at our surroundings and think that God's not doing something, or even that we're doing something wrong just because there's some weeds in our grass. Sometimes it's just our season. Sometimes, in fact, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12 says, do not be confused when you face fiery trials. And so you're going to have weeds. You're going to have some people that are unreasonable. And they're going to be weeds in your life. And you're going to have some people and you're like, whoa, usually I can figure this out with a conversation and a cup of coffee, but this is just like wild, right? Weeds. Sometimes there's going to be circumstances that you're like, man, I didn't expect that diagnosis. I didn't expect that thing. Right, weeds. Sometimes the hardest thing you have to get over is your past. Why? Because you'll just get reminded of some of the dumb stuff that you've done. What is that? That's weeds. And these things are coming up. And because we're expecting just like flat, nice, fertilized, great grass, we're like, we don't know what to do. And God's like, no, I can establish you in the weeds. And these people come in this illustration and they say, like, what did you do wrong? And I love the master's like, the enemy. And sometimes the enemy is within. Sometimes they are decisions that I've made. And sometimes it's just the enemy of my soul that prowls around like a roaring lion seeking to devour whoever he may. And then they ask him, how does this have weeds? And then in verse 28, I want to have the team come up. In verse 28, he says to them, an enemy has done this. That's why, by the way, the enemy is called the prince of this earth. So like this side of heaven, the prince of this earth has a measure of autonomy, still submitted and under God, and God has ultimate authority, but he's the prince of this earth. He says to them, an enemy has done this. So the servant said to him, now this is the question. Then do you want us to go and gather them? But the master says, no, lest in gathering the weeds, you root up the wheat along the way. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. So what does he say? He says, hey, there's going to come a day. Yes, it's called Judgment Day. He's like, hey, there's going to come a day, yes, where the wheat and the weeds get separated. But this is not the day, my friend. He goes, no. I want you to let them grow together. Who in here, let me see your hand if you like enjoy or you do yard work. Let me see your hand. You do yard work. Let me see your hand. Let me see your hand. Yeah, you do yard work. Yeah. Every once in a while I'll be walking around our backyard and I'll see a weed. I'll see a weed. And I gotta be honest, sometimes it's like the most discouraging moment of my whole life. And the reason is,
You ever if you just go like this to your yard, you don't see the weeds. If you just go do like this real quick, you don't see the weeds. But let you get out there with some gloves to say, I'm going to pull the weeds in my yard. Come on. I've had times where I'm out in the yard in the scorching heat, and I start pulling a weed, and that thing is and I start pulling it up, and it's this is unending. I'm I didn't even know that was a weed. That kind of looked like grass. It was pretty. It was green. And I just start pulling weeds, and then I go to where the mulch is. I'm just pulling weeds. I feel like I'm pulling out it's man, these weeds have roots, and I'm trying to pull them. And what I start is I start a never-ending task. And so I've gotten smarter because I can't spend my whole life. I have a job. I have kids to raise. I can't spend my whole life just pulling weeds. So you know what I do? I just kind of look for the ones that could do the most damage. That's what I have time for. I look for the ones that are the most invasive. See, the weeds are growing, and they say, hey, do you want us to pull them all out? And the master, who is Jesus in this scenario, he says, no, don't do it. Why? Because if you pull up the weed now is connected to, at a base level, the wheat. And so you'll end up pulling them both out. That is so true to our lives. Let me ask you this. I'm telling you, there's probably been a lot of weeds in your life that you wish weren't there. Sometimes it's decisions you made. Sometimes it's things that just happened to you that you had no choice in the matter. And if you and I are honest, we'd say, man, I just wish God would just yank up all the weeds. The problem with that is you ever sat down to have a conversation with somebody about what God's doing in your life? You can't do that without talking about the weeds. You can't do it. Everything that God has ever shown you, and every way in which God has ever showed up in your life, the wheat has always been attached to weeds. Every time I stand up on this platform and preach, you want to know what's attached to it? Weeds. Every conversation I ever have about faith, you want to know what's attached to it? Weeds. Why? Because this side of heaven, God says, let them grow together. Why? Because I have put my spirit inside the heart of a believer, and so a believer can be in the midst of weeds and still produce wheat. And sheep can be in the midst of wolves and not be devoured. We got to stop being so soft. Can I just use a layman's term? We got to stop being so soft. Either the Spirit of God dwells within the life of the believer or it doesn't. Either greater is He that is in me than he that's in the world, or He isn't greater than he that's in the world. And we got to stop going, oh man, this is hard, and this is work and that. No. The believer can thrive in the worst work environment. I can show up to work unappreciated and overlooked and show up with a smile on my face going, no, I'm going to be okay. Why? Because here's what I found to be true. This is the secret of life. The cream always rises. Always. It always rises. And this is where the trust we have with God, in which we say, okay, God, you're going to sort it out at the end of all of it. The wheat's going to go over here, and the weeds are going to go over here. You'll sort it out. My job, shrewdness and wisdom, and purity. That's my job. And some of you, can I just encourage you? Some of you probably err on one side or the other probably in this room. We probably, depending upon our personality profile, we probably lean more heavily on one side. So some of you, it's man, you lean heavily on wisdom. Can I encourage you? Lord, give me my innocence back. Yeah, I'm really shrewd, but that shrewdness can turn into harshness very, very quickly. I need my purity back. I need my innocence back. It's yeah, I shouldn't believe everything everybody says, but I need to be open. And some of you, you're so pure and you're so innocent And God's going, hey, I want to give you the mind of Christ. I want to make you wise. I want to make you a discerning person so that you can do what I've called you to do. Come on, let's stand to our feet, Grace City.